Money is just a medium of exchange, a medium of expression, how we express to the world what it is that we value. Bitcoin is scarce digital money that is permissionless and trustless. You don't need to require trust. You don't need to require permission to spend your Bitcoin. That's, I think, the best form of money because you can express yourself freely. Bitcoin is the perfect form. It's like monetary freedom of expression. If you believe in freedom of speech, then you should believe in Bitcoin. We don't experience the benefits of technology because of monetary intervention. And instead, life gets harder and harder and harder. When you start to realize that the world is inherently deflationary, like we see prices constantly rise around us, whether it's house prices, whether it's cost of living, food, groceries, you name it, prices kind of tend to rise. But this isn't actually natural. The natural state of things is that people are always trying to be more efficient. People are always trying to be more productive. So what you start to realize is that prices should be falling over time because we're becoming more productive. We're becoming more efficient. But the challenge is that the rate at which prices should be falling, we're printing money at a greater rate, so we don't actually experience any of those falling prices. And so this is where, when I think about Bitcoin, what is truly profound is that because it's got a fixed supply, as society becomes more productive, as there's more goods and services in society, under that world, prices fall. But they only fall if we've either got a fixed supply or the rate of monetary expansion is less than that of technological advancement. So that's where I think Bitcoin is truly profound. The irony of Bitcoin, given that it is digital money, is that it gets us to stop thinking about money. And that, I think, is like incredible. The world that we live in today, because money continually loses value over time, we're constantly pressured to think more about like, where's my money going to come from? How am I going to put a roof over my head? How am I going to put food on the table? And so we're constantly thinking more and more and more about money, regardless of whether or not we want to. Whereas I think what's interesting about Bitcoin is as it aligns with the natural state of people constantly trying to innovate and be more efficient and more productive, prices should fall in the long term. So our purchasing power increases, which gives us more capacity to show up. And in turn, we start thinking less about money and think more about who we are as an individual. Which brings me into my second point, which is what I love about Bitcoin more than anything, is that it helps us become more authentic. It helps us, increases our capacity to look inwards and ask the hard questions like, who am I? What is it that I value? How do I want to show up in life? And I think that happens because we have more capacity when we've got more purchasing power. When we've got more purchasing power, we can be more compassionate and altruistic and give back into society. And so more than anything, I think Bitcoin is just incredible because it gets us to stop thinking about money and it gives us more capacity to look inwards and be more authentic. And for me, I think that is profound. What a lot of people don't necessarily grasp or struggle to grasp sometimes is that when money loses value over time, people are still going to try and store value somewhere. And if they're not storing it in the money, well, where does that go? People start using things like properties. People start using farmland. They start using stocks. They start using all of these various assets, commodities, you name it, as a store of value because money doesn't act as a store of value. And so I would argue that house prices right now are unbelievably inflated because people are using them as a store of value and not for their utility purpose, which is putting a roof over their people's heads. Now, like where I live in the small little ski town of Whistler, BC, and I mention it in my book, 61% of houses are empty and we have a housing crisis. And I'm just like, if for the average person, they're just like, what is going on? Let's just force these people to rent. But the reality is they don't want to deal with the drama of rentals. All they want to do is preserve their purchasing power. So they're going and purchasing these properties and storing capital in these properties because hopefully it's going to devalue at a slower rate than holding it in the currency. And the same thing is true for farmland. Farmland today has been bought up left, right, and center, but people aren't using it to grow crops and to add value to society. Instead, they're using it to store value. And so you're now taking these productive assets from society, whether it's farmland, whether it's real estate that could be used to put a roof over people's heads or put food on the table. You're taking them off the table and you're using them simply to store value. And this is all a byproduct of broken money. It's all a byproduct of money that doesn't store value. Money really does influence us as individuals and it influences our psychology and how we show up. And so kind of in the book, there's kind of like the three main psychological components that I think it touches on. The first one, and Bitcoiners talk about this, is time preference. And so for those that aren't familiar, it's like a spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, you've got high time preference, which is, am I trying to just be impulsive and meet my immediate needs right here, right now? On the other side of the spectrum, you've got low time preference, which is, am I thinking about the future, building stability and security, and I'm looking ahead as opposed to being reactive and just responding to what's in my immediate kind of vicinity. And what's interesting is when money is worth less over time, we're incentivized to consume over save. And so all of a sudden, we're just trying to meet our immediate needs. How do I put a roof over my head right now? How do I put food on the table? And so Money, when it is broken, when it doesn't store value effectively, shifts our focus towards our immediate needs, and it shifts away from our long-term needs of security and stability. And so this is one of the reasons why I'd say we have such a consumerist society today, is because of money. It is not just because we have a society that cares about buying the newest watch or the newest car or the newest shoes. It is because money is pushing us to consume because it's worth less over time. Intervention always leads to unintended consequences. And we see this in the financial markets. When we intervene and we paper over the cracks, you prevent this natural cycle of fiscal irresponsibility to clean through. If a company has borrowed beyond its means and is not offering value, it should wither away. But when we start bailing out those companies, they've already proven to be fiscally irresponsible. And now we're enabling them to continue to be fiscally irresponsible and to be way more capitally destructive. And we've seen this time and time and time again. When we intervene monetarily, when we try and support others, when we try and interject capital into society, we end up creating all of these unintended consequences. And so I think that in society, if we were to align to the natural state of things, which is prices should be falling, people will say, well, if our purchasing power is increasing, then people aren't going to spend. People still want to live. People always want to go and live. And the perfect analogy to that is just computers. Every year, computers are becoming more and more efficient, and people still go and buy a new computer. People they don't wait for, oh, computers in 10 years' time are going to be way better, so I'm going to wait for 10 years to buy a computer. They don't, because in the end, we want to be able to still live and we want to be able to thrive. So we're always going to spend money to be able to live and thrive. It's just at the moment we're incentivized to go and spend even when we don't have that capital because our money is worth its most in the present moment. The problem with our current system is that it's constantly getting us to focus on money. Like when our money loses value over time, I'm constantly pushed to think about like, where am I going to be able to afford to put food on the table or a roof over my head? And even if you're in a position where you're lucky enough to not be meeting your basic needs and you're actually in a position where you're starting to try and build wealth, it's now like, okay, now how do I protect my wealth? I got to try and put it in something that is outpacing inflation, or at least keeping up with the monetary supply expansion. And so it's just like the way our world currently works is that everyone is just constantly focused on money. And if you're a plumber or you're a single mum or you're whatever, all of a sudden you also have to be an investor. You got to figure out how the markets work to protect your purchasing power. And it's just like, why don't we just live in a world where we can actually just store our purchasing power in the currency and we don't have to think about constantly being an investor. We don't have to think about how the markets work because a lot of people aren't interested in that. And so I think that it's my opinion that if we were to live on, say, a Bitcoin standard, that the financial system, the whole financial industry would be 90% smaller than it is today. I think it'd be a fraction of the size because it's only the size that it is because people are constantly trying to protect their purchasing power. So they constantly need all of these derivative products and these financial products and these various different assets, and they need financial planners and financial managers, all because of the broken monetary system. Value is subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. People find value in the utility of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is scarce digital money that is permissionless and trustless. Money is just a medium of exchange, a medium of expression, how we express to the world what it is that we value. And when you have something that's trustless, when you have something that's permissionless, that doesn't require, you don't need to require trust, you don't need to require permission to spend your Bitcoin, that's, I think, the best form of money because you can express yourself freely. Bitcoin is the perfect form. It's like monetary freedom of expression. If you believe in freedom of speech, then you should believe in Bitcoin.